Hi, I'm Robert Joseph, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this fun little number. So this is a T-Back Thong. The pattern number is 87, and it comes in two views. The suit that is on the mannequin is view A, and this is view B. So view B has elastic for the sides and the center back strap, and that's a different video. So make sure you're watching the correct tutorial. So again, this is view A tutorial, and the difference between this and the previous thong pattern that I have is that the front wraps all the way around to the back, and I'll just show you this really quick. So the front wraps around here where it connects to the T shape in the center back, which also connects to the center back strap here. The other difference is that I just incorporate using 3/8 wide elastic here for the waist area and for around the leg openings. So be aware of that, and there is no drawstring. So I'm getting to the tutorial for view A right after the intro. Okay, so before we start cutting out the fabric, I just want to talk about the pattern pieces first. So I am making view A in the T-Back Thong, and there are three pieces for this. There's the front pouch, and then there is the back T-Back, and then there is the back strap that goes from the T down to the inseam or the crotch. So I'm going to be placing these with the arrow going in the greatest stretch of the fabric. That's actually, in this case, it's selvage to selvage. So you'll see me place that on the fabric itself. So the other thing to know about this is that I'm going to actually fully line the front. I don't have a separate pattern piece for that, so it says here cut to lining. Now you don't have to line it if you don't want to, but then you'll have this center front seam, and that might be bothersome. Also, if you choose, you don't have to line all the way up. This is actually part of the waistband here in this area. You could just cut off the lining around here, and that would be fine. Just kind of fold the pattern over this way and crease it, and then cut your lining off here. And you don't need to actually finish the lining edge on that side. But I'm going to do the entire front here and part of the waist. Now, one of the things that you should also have, make sure on your pattern that you have the elastic cut amounts. These are suggestions, so this here is for the waist elastic. These measurements include the seam allowances. Over here is the elastic that goes around the lower pouch and the bottom area of the waistband, and that's all the way around. The measurements are for all the way around the leg opening and the pouch area. So you're going to need two of those. And it's quite a bit larger if you've worked with the leg elastics before. So just so you know, the way this goes together is here's the front pouch, and this is actually where it connects here for the back, right here. And then if you notice, I have two little small castle notches here, and that matches here. And here at the bottom of the strap, I have a larger triangle, and that actually matches up to the bottom crotch or the inseam here, and that arrow, the triangle actually matches to the center seam there. So now I may or may not clip this out. I just want you to be aware that this is how it matches up on this strap. And I have here on this strap part, so I just want to mention here that I have two different arrows going on here, and that's just to help you understand. So I'm going to place this with this arrow going in the greatest stretch. So it's going to go basically selvage to selvage. And this other arrow here, it says straight of knit, and that's actually what you would consider the straight grain if you're working on a woven fabric. So knits don't have a weave to them, they have a knit. And so what I mean by the straight of knit is this is the direction of the loop, and the loop is either going to go up or down depending on which way you have your fabric flipped. So it's not going to go on the sideways. So but if you're working with a 4-way stretch and it stretches the same amount, it really doesn't matter which way you have these laying on the fabric. Just be aware that if you choose to lay these out in a different manner, straight grain or straight of knit or on the greatest stretch, you know, your patterns may line up and they may not line up. So I generally kind of don't worry about lining anything up during these tutorials because I would just want to get through to make sure you understand how to put them together. So there are 3 pattern pieces, and then you have all your measurements for the elastic. And I have the fabric here that I'm going to be using. Let's quickly talk about this elastic. So what I'm using in the demo today is I've got this 3/8 wide inch elastic, and this is actually knitted elastic. I actually would prefer a braided elastic. I ran out of my swimwear elastic, which is actually cotton wrapped polyester, cotton wrapped rubber, and that goes around where the leg opening is. So I'm going to put that around here. But in this one, because it's a thong, I'm also going to be using it all the way around the waistband. Now the reason I say that I would rather use a braided elastic is because braided elastic is a little bit stronger. Now I'm just doing this tutorial so you can see how to put everything together. There's really nothing wrong with knit elastic if you can't find anything else. It just tends to be a little bit thinner. When you have it on a couple of layers of swimwear fabric, it tends not to have a great recoil. It doesn't kind of come back very easy, which means it kind of gets stretched out as you sew. So we'll see what that looks like at the end, okay? So I just happen to have this on hand, and I ran out of my other elastic as well. You can also use rubber elastic if you can find it. Use a thin rubber elastic with a good stretch to it. So the fabrics I'm going to be using today is this kind of light blue and silver snake skin, mock snake skin. It has a decent amount of stretch, but not a whole lot. So just be aware of that when you're purchasing fabrics. I make the patterns for them to have a moderate stretch. So this will be okay. Of course, you don't have to make this out of swimwear. You can use any jersey knit or any knit that stretches. So I'm going to be using this, and I'm going to be fully lining it. And in my other videos, if you've learned anything, you'll know that I use a Halenka knit, and this is 100% polyester. Sometimes you can find it in nylon or nylon polyester blend, but this is a special knit that actually quick dries. It doesn't hold on to the water, and it's very lightweight, and it stretches a lot. Any kind of lining that you're going to be using for swimwear, you want it to actually stretch at least as much as your knit or even more. So just know that. This is called Halenka, Helenca, if you can find it. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be cutting the elastic along with the cutout. So I'm going to get to laying the fabric out and cutting this right now. And as you know, I'm going to speed that portion of the video up. Okay, so let's work on this front pouch first. Let's get that sewn up. So we can just put the paper pattern away. And let's set these other two pieces aside. We don't need those right now. And so let's take these pieces here, and I have them face side together. And I'm going to just get them lined up. Now, if you have fabric that is lightweight or it has a mind of its own, you could probably go ahead and pin this together around where you're going to sew. We're going to sew right around here on the outside here. And I'm just going to pin these together just to keep them together for right now, because we're actually going to stack this on top of the lining here. And I'm just going to get these lined up. And you want to make sure you're matching your face sides together. That's if you have a printed side, then you'll want the prints to go together. Of course, this is the lining, but your lining could have a print on it as well. So I'm going to actually pin this together this way, because this is going to go on the bottom. I want this to go near the feed dogs, because since it stretches more than the outside fabric, when I'm sewing, I don't want the lining to really stretch out. So I'm going to put the lining on the bottom where the feed dogs can like kind of help keep it in place. Now I'm going to take my garment fabric and lay it right on top here, kind of matching. Be careful not to stretch things as you are handling them. And I'm just going to repin this, and I'll take this other pin out of the lining. And I match it here with this notch. That's what that notch is there. That notch is just to match your front pieces. It doesn't match to anything else. So I'm going to take this lining pin. I'm just going to pin it there. Get this one pinned up. And then match the top and that curve. Whoops. Match that curve. And I'm pinning kind of parallel to the edge here, and that's so I can easily remove the pins as I'm sewing instead of it perpendicular. The reason I take the perpendicular pins out is because I don't want to accidentally go too fast in the overlock machine, and then my knife will hit it, and then I'll have to replace the knife. Okay, so that's how we're looking for right now. So this is what we're going to do. I've got my lining pinned with face sides together. Then I've got my fashion fabric or my suit fabric pinned face sides together, and those are just stacked on top of each other. And then we're going to sew all the way around this outside side seam with our overlock, and I'm using a double needle, 4-thread double needle for this. Now, if you don't like sewing all 4 layers together, you can sew them separately and then just kind of tack them probably here at the bottom. And I've done that in another video before. Once you just sew each individual pair together, just come back with your straight stitch machine and just tack it together here somewhere at the bottom, and that's just so it doesn't move around. But I choose to sew all 4 layers together. So let's go do that right now. Okay, so we've got the outer front seam sewn. I'm going to turn this face side out so we can see it. Okay, so this is what it looks like right now. And we've got our linings, and what I want to do is carefully, and let's turn this inside out actually, so we can kind of see that. Now we've got our lining all the way across the front. Now, of course, you could trim this off here. You don't really need to have all this line, but I wanted to go ahead and do that so you could see it. So you could probably bring your lining up right here and just kind of cut that off, and you won't need to overlock that if you do. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to baste the lining to the garment. So I'm going to use a long stitch, and I'm just going to baste it about 1/4 inch from the edge. I'm just going to use the edge of my presser foot. And you can do that on your straight stitch machine. The reason I'm doing that is because I want the lining to stay in place while I'm working with the elastic. And I'm going to do this before I sew the other seams. So I will actually do that, I'll bring the actually, I'm not. I was thinking I was lining the T, but I'm actually not. I don't call we don't I don't call for the lining on the back T part of this. So you can line it if you want to, although the pattern does not suggest it. So I'm going to get this basted just to hold all of this, because if you worked with swimwear fabric before, you know that it has a mind of its own, and I just kind of want everything to stay in place while I work with the elastic. So actually I'm going to do it on the top here too. And I know this takes a little bit more time to do, but you know, it helps the headaches stay away. Couple more pins, and then I'll just quickly show you on the sewing machine, although I speed the sewing sections up. Okay, so now that we have the lining all basted in here, that now we can actually work with the other pieces of the garment. So I have brought in the T-back here, and then of course the strap, and we'll do the T-back first. So this edge here goes to this edge and this edge. So I'm just going to flip this over, and I'm going to match that up, and it's going to seem like it's on an angle, and it looks like my lining stretched a little bit, and that's okay as long as on the other side it's roping just a little bit, but that's okay. Once you wear it, it will stretch out. So I'm going to cut that off while we sew. So face sides together, I'm going to match this edge here, and I can put a pin in that if I would want to. Hold that together, and I'm going to do both sides at the same time. So there, I've got that one marked, and then this one I can pull over here and match to this edge. And they are at a slight angle, but when you sew, it's going to be straight. So now I can just sew these two with the overlock, these edges, and then we'll come back and we'll actually join the center back strap. Okay, so we've got the T on, and I'll just turn this face side out so we can kind of have a look at that really quick. So this is the back with that sewn on, and then there's the space for the strap. And if we turn it around, we can kind of see that. So let's work, we're going to continue to work on the back. So remember I told you about that little castle notch that I kind of made a little bit bigger. And then the triangle notch goes to the front pouch at the bottom here. So I'm actually going to sew one at a time. And I'm going to get this in here. I'll just pin this together. And then I will come back. And once that's sewn together, we will match this bottom part of the strap to the bottom of the pouch here. But I'm going to stitch this together really quick. Okay, so we've got that stitched on. Now we want to match this triangle, this triangle notch here, and we can fold it over this way and pull it out the other way so we can see it. Basically, that's how we want to see it. But let's actually turn the whole thing inside out if we can. And I want to look at the back. Okay. So now we're looking at the back, and here is the front that's been flipped inside out. And here is the face side of that strap, and I'm going to match the face side to the face side here up at the edge. And it's kind of confusing because we have this notch we're actually going to be cutting off as we are sewing it. And I'm going to put this here at the center, and if you need to stretch just slightly, let me get this pinned to that center front there. It's okay if the front is a little bit bigger, because we can compensate for that when we put the elastic on. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this together, and I made it just a tiny bit smaller than the front because I wanted the compensation to happen once we stitch it. So we'll get this in here, and as you'll see when I come here, I'll probably stretch this part just a little bit just to match the edge on that front part, okay? But I'm going to take that pin out before I sew. So let's go over to the overlock. All right, so I've got that stitched here, and it does look a little bit larger on either side, and that's okay because once we get the elastic on there, that will actually compensate, and that will be covered with the overlock, and then we're going to be flipping this over. And that gives you a little extra room to actually wiggle around once you get it turned, okay? So you'll see what I mean once you get there. So we've got all our pieces sewn together, so that means that we can start working with the elastic. And let's do the hard elastic first, the difficult elastic first, which is the elastic that goes around the leg openings here and around the back part. And the reason I say that it's difficult or challenging is because it's a long piece of elastic. So what I'm going to do, and I didn't put a notch for your start and stop, and the reason I did that is because I didn't want this to be any more confusing than it is, and it really doesn't have to be that confusing. You don't even have to actually measure the elastic once you get going with understanding how to make these. A lot of times I don't even measure the elastic because I understand the stretch, but I understand that some may like to actually know exactly how much elastic they're going to be putting on here and where it's going to start and end. So where I'm going to start and end is probably about 1 inch away from this seam here. So I'm going to put a pin here. It's about maybe 1.5 inches away. And the reason I'm starting here rather than at a seam or anywhere else is because this is probably a non-noticeable spot where you might have extra bulk. So what I'm going to do is at that pin, I'm going to start to divide the leg opening into fourths. So what I'm going to do is fold on that pin and gently walk this around to match the cut edges. Don't stretch, just gently walk it around to find the other folded edge. And it may or may not be that same, and it looks like I can use that seam. It just happens to be as the other edge, and I'm going to go ahead and put a pin there. So now I'm going to actually match up those two pins, and then I'm going to carefully walk these edges to find the other edges. And I don't think I'll quite be able to use that seam. It's just a little bit away. And these pins are just to mark the other edge. And again, we're just dividing this into fourths because once we get our elastic sewn in a circle, we're going to divide that elastic into fourths, and then we will apply it. Okay? So again, here on this side, okay, this is my starting pin, and then this pin is 1/4, and to that pin is 1/4, and to this pin is 1/4, and then back to the original as another fourth. I'm going to do this other side off camera, and I'm going to actually bring the elastic in now. Okay, so I have the other side, other leg opening pinned for the markings for the elastic, and I decided instead of working with those elastics right now, I'm going to go ahead and pin the waist band because I want to divide that into fourths as well. So I'm going to fold it here at the center front, gently walk that around since I don't have a real side seam or a center back seam. So this is my center back. I folded it in half, and I'll put that pin there if it will go in. And then I match that pin up here to the center front seam, and then walk to find out where that side would be. And I'll put a pin here, and then do that for the other side. Okay, so now we've got everything on the suit divided into fourths, and now I can work with the elastics. Okay, so I have the elastics. I'm ready to go. This is my waist elastic, and these are my leg opening and lower waistband elastics. So I need to actually sew these together so it creates a ring. So we're going to overlap the ends, and I'm going to overlap them a 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of mark approximately a 1/2 inch. And if you have a ruler, you can do this, but I have a grid board here. Each one of these squares is 1 inch, and these dot marks are 1/4 inch. So I can just mark that there, and then make sure that I'm marking on the same side. And then what I'm going to do is kind of roll this around and overlap them on top of each other. And then we'll stitch straight across here. And I'm just going to put a pin in that. It's kind of narrow, I know. So there we have a ring. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with the leg elastic. I'll just mark these. And you know, if you go overboard on the overlapping, it's okay. Probably a little bit more snugness is okay. And if you feel that my suggestions for the elastic amount is not enough or too little, go ahead and adjust it for what you need. Now, of course, keep your elastics so that you know which one is the waist and which one is the legs. Got this one, last one to mark and pin, and then we'll go over to the regular sewing machine, and we'll just straight stitch right across. And probably want to use a small stitch, maybe a 2 or a 2.5. Okay, we're all ready to sew. Okay, so now all of our elastics are kind of sewn together, and they're not kind of sewn, they are sewn together in rings. This is the waist, and these two here are the leg openings. And just make sure, go around and make sure that you don't have any twists in them. So now we can actually pin these to the garment. Before we do that, we want to actually divide the rings into quarters as well. And I'm just going to use chalk to do that instead of pins, because that's an awful lot of pins. So I'm going to fold here on my stitch line, and then fold it in half. And then I'm going to just mark this here with the chalk. And then I'm going to take that chalk mark, and I'm going to match it up to that stitch line where I sewed the ring together at the ends. And then I'm going to fold it, and on either side I'm going to mark it. Now this is the waist. Now one thing to note is that you probably don't want to pin all of the elastics and do them all at once. That can be kind of confusing. So I'm going to do it one at a time. So I'm just going to do the waist first, and I like to kind of flip this over this way so I can see it. And I've got it here so I can kind of see my markings. It's going to go in this way. So what I will do is I will grab, where did I put my pins? I could take the old pins out, but I just want to make sure that I don't lose those. So I'm going to match that stitch line where I overlapped it to the center back. And then I'm just going to walk the elastic around. Don't stretch it just yet. And I'm just going to match each of those pins where I divided into fourths, and I'll just pin the elastic down. Now the elastic probably will not need to be stretched a whole lot because the suit is designed for it to be all that much smaller for your body anyway. So the elastic and the suit should stretch together. Okay, although you will probably want to stretch it just a little bit as you sew. Get this pin here. Whoops, I took that one out, but that's okay. It seems to be going around pretty easy. Now, of course, if you want more elastic, if you want it to be more snug, you could, of course, make your elastic smaller in waist. Now, one of the things that you will need to decide is these two seams here on the T-back, which way you want them to fold, right? Do you want them to fold in, or do you want them to fold out? So it kind of gives a different look. And I'm not too sure. Maybe I'll fold them both in toward the T. Is that how I want it to go this way? Yeah, I'll probably do that way. So I'm going to start here. And I guess I will sew with the elastic up. A lot of times I like to sew with the elastic down, but I think I'll sew with the elastic up this time. Okay, so I'm going to just run over to the overlock and put this in there. Now, one note about the overlock that I've decided to do is I've taken out that right needle, so I'm going to have 3 threads, single needle. I don't need that second needle in there for this because I'm just applying the elastic. I'm not really sewing a seam. So it will use less thread and it will be less bulk. So that's what you will see in the overlock. So let's go ahead and apply the elastic to the garment. Okay, so I have the waist elastic on, and I don't know if you saw me struggle there a little bit, but my machine did not like this foil side being on the feed dog, so I kind of had to help it through the machine. So maybe test your fabric before you actually sew on your actual garment. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to try to have the foil side up like this as I'm sewing the elastic down here. But I need to actually pin the elastic to one of these legs. So let's set this over here for right now. And I'm going to take one of these. I'm just going to do one of these, and then the other side will be exactly the same. So I'm going to divide this in fourths just like I did the waistband. Fold it on that stitching. Find the other side and mark with the chalk, and then match the chalk to your stitch line. And then find the other sides and mark here. And mark there. All right. So now before, remember I said in the back I want to start it about 1.5 inches away from the back seam. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flip this to the wrong side out, and I'm going to actually just go ahead and pin that around. So this is that mark. And so this is where I'm going to pin here, and I need to pin on the other side because I want to see this side in the machine. So I'm just going to flip this around so I can kind of see that a little bit better. And then I will just go ahead and pin this. So I'm going to have to flip it all around. And then I'm going to match. Where am I matching this to? I think one of my pins fell out, so I'm going to have to fold this again. Let me actually mark this. So this happens. Those of you who sew a lot know that it does happen. So I match this back up to the half and find out where that pin was. There it was. Pin there. Okay, so again, I will come back, place the stitched ends there, and I think I'll just flip the pins before I sew, and then match to the next pin. And again, if you feel like this isn't enough stretch that you're putting in, you can always make it smaller. Now, one more note here, I'm coming down to that crotch seam or the inseam, depending on how you like to call it. I'm going to match here, right where that pin is, and I'm folding the seam allowance toward the strap and away from the pouch. And then I will match up here at the next pin. And just remember, here at the T part, we have the seam folding in toward the T part, and so I'm making sure that this seam here on the strap is actually folding up toward the T. And I'll just have to remember to actually do that while I'm sewing. So now I'm going to go back and flip these because I want to actually sew on the top side. The elastic is going to be on the bottom because my machine didn't like sewing on this foil. Sometimes specialty fabrics like this with like hologram and stuff, it tends to stick to the machine bed, and the feed dogs kind of don't like it. It gets slippery for them. So you just kind of have to work around it. I don't have a Teflon foot for my overlock. So, and I'm not sure I really want to buy one because I can work around it. Okay, so that elastic is all pinned. I'm getting all twisted around here. Okay, there we are. Okay, so we're all pinned correctly. Here is the leg opening. I'm going to flip this over to the back side so you can see that. So right here is where I'm going to start. So I'll flip this over this way and put it in the machine starting there, right there. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I have that elastic done around the leg opening, and I just need to do the other one. And I'm not going to video that side because it's exactly the same, but I will call out. It was a little bit easier this time sewing on the top, but I still did get some pull, so I still had to help it through the machine with this specialty foiled swimwear fabric. So one thing that I will mention about this back strap area, because it's it's only one layer, is that if you're going to stretch more elastic in this side, you want to try to do an equal amount of stretch on the other side when you apply that elastic. Otherwise, you'll get dual stretches, and it will kind of look kind of funny, although this is actually probably not going to be seen as you wear it, and it will stretch out as you wear it. Remember, we're going to be flipping this under and top stitching this, so on either side. But we're actually going to be sewing the elastic going the opposite way, so we really want to try to keep the same amount of stretch on either side. So maybe after you've done a couple of these, you'll understand more about what that would look like if it were unevenly stretched. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side of this, and then the next scene we'll actually be getting ready to actually fold this elastic under. Okay, so we have all the elastics applied to this, and now all we need to do is turn the elastic over to the inside. So when you do this, make sure that when you turn it over, you feel the nice flush edge here on that turn. So you should feel the edge of the elastic. Don't turn it over so you get a wobbly, extra fabric there. Make sure it's nice and snug when you turn it over. And I'm going to kind of stitch this down. Now, for those of you who are using a regular sewing machine, you will use a zigzag, and I usually set mine to 4mm by 4mm, but you can play with that. Some of you will like to do a 3-step zigzag, but today I'm going to be using my cover stitch machine. So anywhere I use a cover stitch, you can use a zigzag stitch. So I've been asked by some viewers to use my cover stitch machine more, and I'm all very happy to do that. It looks a little bit more professional, although there are some swimwear companies out there that use a 3-step zigzag. And what's unique about that is that with the 3-step, once one stitch pulls out, they don't all come out. So it's just a little bit of safety there. And it can also be a little bit of a, can look really pretty and nice on the outside as well. So I'm actually pinning around here the waist, and I'm just going to show you. So I will have to take these pins out when I sew, because on the cover stitch machine you're actually sewing on the top of the fabric. So I will switch those around in just a minute. So I've got the waist all turned to the inside. So now what you can do is be very careful, and these should, the way I've designed this is that these elastics should really just kind of match right up with each other along that seam, the side seam area. So just turn that over and you'll pin that down, and it should match really nicely, which gives you kind of a skinny side, as well as, once I get to this area, as well as to the strap in the center back. Now as you go around this curve here, you kind of see the T-back part, there's a curve. You will have to stretch to get that to roll nicely over. And I know I'm kind of switching this around. It's hard for you to see in the camera. So you'll have to stretch that around in the curve to get that to lay correctly, which is normal. And then here in the T-back, the strap area actually, I just want to get that nice and flush against that elastic. We're coming back here to the pouch area, and you'll have to stretch that in as well. So I'm just pinning this, and see how it's smaller, so you'll just kind of stretch it and roll it in there, and again make sure it's nice and flush, that you feel that edge of the elastic and the fabric. And again, I'm going to have to pin this. I usually don't pin it like when I'm making regular stuff, not for the videos. I don't really pin it. I just feel the elastic and the stretch as I go along. So I'm just pinning this for your benefit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, let me go back to this, the center back strap, and I'm going to flip this side over so you can see it. It's not super skinny, but the two pieces should match, the two edges should match right when you get into that center area of it. Okay, and then it will widen back out a little bit as you come back up to the fabric. And that was the pouch front area, and then the center part, and then it widens out back up here when you come to the T part. Okay, so let me just turn this face side out. You get the idea of what this is going to look like. Okay, so this one here, this is the center front with all these pins in it, coming back here to the side seam, which is really skinny, and then also here, this is the bottom of the pouch, and then the center of the back. Okay, so I'm probably going to reverse the waist, and as you see me in the cover stitch, so you won't see the pins on the face side, so you'll just see me do the cover stitch here on the top side. And then once all of this is done, the suit is about done, I'll come right back here to close everything out. And so now that we are done with all the cover stitching or the zigzagging, depending on what you did, we are done with our T-Back Thong. And because of the stretchiness, you will get a little bit of waviness around the waist area and along the leg opening. But once you put it on, all of that will stretch out and fit you. So now one note about the basting stitches that you did along where the lining was. You may need to snap those or kind of pull them out. You see they're kind of wavy in here, if you can kind of see that in the camera. This is little line. You can actually pull that out. You don't need those stitches, or you can just leave them in if they're not bothersome to you. So if you have gotten this far, congratulations. If you are about to start, I would suggest playing the video as you sew, and that will help you get a really nice thong.